We want AIs that will be peaceful, that will be able to cooperate. The one thing we don't want is any entity that thinks it can win by not being peaceful.
Welcome to Doom Debates. I'm Liron Shapira. Today I'm reacting to a recent interview of Dr. Richard Sutton over on Daniel Faggella's up-and-coming podcast, The Trajectory. Dr. Richard Sutton is a professor of computing science at the University of Alberta. He is considered one of the founders of modern computational reinforcement learning. In a 2019 essay, Sutton criticized the field of AI research for failing to learn the quote-unquote bitter lesson that throwing more data and computation into your AI gives you better performance than having the programmers try to give it structured domain knowledge. In 2023, he and John Carmack founded Keen Technologies, a company that aims to create an artificial mind. Finally, Dr. Sutton is known for taking the position that AIs are the next step in human evolution, a positive force for progress, and not a catastrophic extinction risk comparable to nuclear weapons. Over the course of this episode, you're going to see that Richard and I have very different perspectives on the problem of AI risk. We're going to go over everything he said in that interview, and I'll tell you why. So to kick things off, Daniel asks Richard high level to summarize how he sees humanity evolving into AI. This is kind of the classic Richard Sutton worldview. It's going to be used to justify why we don't have to worry about doom, but as just a description of an ideal where humanity can move forward and take different forms and evolve, I think it's totally fair. I mean, I'm a transhumanist myself, so it's good as like an optimistic target. It just talks past the doom claim. Let's take a listen.
Well, I think the thing to keep in mind is the world is evolving and it's not really under anyone's control. AI researchers are trying to understand intelligence well enough to create beings of greater intelligence than current people. And this is a grand milestone in the history of really the planet. You know, it's on the order of the creation of life, the start of life. This is the start of life-like things being designed. And so this is something that people have been working towards forever, and we always strived to know ourselves and to make ourselves better. And when we create tools, and that we get changed by our tools, this is what humans have always done. And the next big step is to understand ourselves. As I like to say, this is a quest, grand and glorious, and quintessentially human.
But just to state the obvious, if we get slaughtered tomorrow, then nobody's necessarily going to be continuing the quest because the slaughter bot that killed us might just want to build paperclips, right? That's a very plausible scenario that a lot of experts are worried about. So we should probably make sure to address that scenario.
A simple way of saying it is that the fearmongers have won. I feel the fearmongers have won. The standard discussion about AI is there's danger and we have to somehow protect ourselves from it. So that's in that sense, the fearmongers have won.
Woohoo, I won! All right, good night, everybody. Another successful debate win for me. Oh, hold on. Do you have an argument why the fearmongers shouldn't have won? In this next part, Daniel asks Richard about a worthy versus unworthy AI successor. So Richard's going to give some answers about what he's hoping to see in the AI that succeeds humanity. And my claim is probably going to be like, okay, great, but you're not going to get that. You're just going to get hell, right? That's generally how I push back on these things. But let's see what Richard Sutton says.
If we think about what is a worthy successor, I might imagine, Richard, maybe you can't, I suspect you could, a successor that might be unworthy. Maybe such a successor would be eternally unconscious. Maybe it would, the paperclip maximizer is a bit of an exaggeration, but maybe it would optimize for something pretty narrow. So we would hope for this expansion, this dynamic system that you like to talk about where there's no one thing that's going to survive forever. Maybe it would be optimizing in a much more limited way and not be able to keep up with that dynamicness. And it might squelch this flame that humans and other life has started instead of proliferating it. But on the other hand, we might have a worthy successor, which would expand that flame, which I believe was your language just a minute ago. What would be the qualities of a worthy successor where if it were to take the keys and we were to know we're not necessarily contributing anymore, you would feel pretty good about those keys leaving your hands and say, you know what? Maybe we did it. This is probably maybe a net good for life and for the universe. What would be the traits of such an entity?
Well, peaceful. is number one.
Huh. Wow. Okay. Let's totally unpack that. I mean, list them out, but that was not what I was expecting first. This is going to be interesting.
Peaceful means it's not trying to impose its will on us, and we're not trying to impose our will on it.
Okay, so the problem is peaceful isn't an attractor state in the space of possible AIs. When you have an AI that's gentle, an AI that's peaceful, well, if you ask it to do something for you, it might get really into doing that thing, and it might spawn a child AI that's really aggressive, and suddenly you lose that sense of gentleness and peace. On the other hand, once you have an AI that's really aggressive, that's not peaceful, that AI is never going to be like, let me make a peaceful AI. So it's a one-way train. That's why I call it an attractor state. The arrows point from AI designs that start out peaceful toward AI designs that get increasingly aggressive and competitive. The arrow never points from aggressive AIs to AIs that just sit back and act peaceful and gentle. Now, maybe by peaceful he means something that's somehow compatible with this observation, but I think it's just a pipe dream to be like, yeah, AIs are going to be peaceful without realizing how unlikely that is.
It's not trying to impose its will on us and other people. But it is working with us. It is collaborating with us. It's cooperating with us.
I mean, that's the holy grail, right? If you can describe a scenario where the AI is super intelligent and it's just cooperating with us, like doing what we want with like some sort of feedback loop, it's a little hard to imagine because, humans live a very slow motion existence from the perspective of these super intelligent AIs. It's like, imagine that you're a human and your whole life you have to cooperate with a gorilla, but the gorilla just operates at 1,000 times slower than you. So like the gorilla could be like making one hand gesture to you and it would just take all day. And your life is about cooperating with that gorilla. It's kind of weird to even describe it as cooperating. It's more like you try to write down everything you know about what the gorilla wants, and then you just go do it. And like occasionally, I guess you'll check in and see if that's okay with the gorilla, but do you even really need to check in? I mean, the human scientists already know gorillas better than gorillas know gorillas, right? So it's really a situation where you take the utility function and you run. Describing it as cooperation implies that there's a need for the gorilla to somehow play some sort of role. But what is that role? I mean, we're talking about two different leagues of operation here. An intelligent human compared to 1,000x slower gorilla, it's just not much of a back and forth. It's not much of an interplay. So I feel like Richard Sutton is mining an intuition of like two equals cooperating or like two friends, which makes sense in the domain of like human history, right? And our biological roots tell us that we should cooperate and we should be a team. But it's just not true when you have a super brain that's optimizing the universe, that it's going to be like your buddy and your partner and you're going to have like a rich back and forth. It's probably not going to work like that.
I would say we want a civilization that's peaceful, first of all, and prosperous. Peaceful and prosperous. And then we should acknowledge that it is decentralized, and it should be decentralized. Decentralized means there's no individual in control. It consists of many parts, and they're cooperating and competing in sort of I think the phrase is a complex system. So a complex system has many parts, it evolves over time. A complex system like the rainforest or an economy. So it's multipolar. Well, that's part of what we mean by decentralized. There's no one empire in charge of the civilization.
Yeah.
And the way our civilization works, the way it's so successful, is because we can cooperate. Because there are voluntary interactions, and it's the voluntary interactions that really so much of the success of our society or our civilization comes from. And so we want to preserve this notion that the individuals, participants, are peaceful and are seeking their goals, pursuing their goals by doing exchanges and cooperation.
These are pretty vague specifiers. Like when you say decentralized, take the modern United States. Is that decentralized enough for you? Do you want it to be more decentralized? States are decentralized relative to the federal government. Individuals are decentralized relative to their state government, but we still cooperate to have a government. So presumably there's like the perfect level of centralization that we can pick and we can tweak. So it's when you say decentralized, you actually mean a combination of centralized and decentralized. Oh, okay. So you're just saying I'm going to name spectrums like the decentralization spectrum, and I'm just going to posit that in the future we're trying to seek the ideal point on that spectrum. Okay, yeah, that's tautologically true, right? So when you say it should be decentralized, besides going all the way to the obvious end of the spectrum that seems really bad, if you have a dictator and the dictator doesn't share your values, okay, fine, that's bad. But what else can you say? How much farther toward the decentralization spectrum do you want to get before it's like, well, now I'm too decentralized. I'm not benefiting from protections of a government. Right now, there's like too much anarchy. I mean, there's going to be a point on the spectrum. So when you say it's going to be decentralized, you're just not saying much. You're only saying a very little bit. And when you're answering the question of like, what is the specification for heaven? How are you trying to build the future? When your answer is, it's going to be peaceful, it's going to be decentralized. Okay, but it's barely telling me anything, because conflicts are going to come up. People are going to have super intelligent agents with different goals, and resources are going to be scarce, right? You can only do one thing with planet Earth. You can only do one thing with the galaxy, and they're going to battle it out and saying, well, the battles are going to be decentralized. Okay, but they're going to come and fight. Oh, wait, but you said they're going to be peaceful. Okay, but resource allocation is inherently a clash of utility functions. So whatever process you use to settle the clash of utility functions, even if it's not literally destructive violence, whatever process it is, some potential value is going to be destroyed for some party. So how is that peaceful? I mean, if people are fighting it out in court and they're trying to drain the other person's pocketbook by making the lawsuit as expensive as possible, is that peaceful, right? Or what if somebody is like, the way they're fighting you is by choking off your economic inputs. So your factory is not able to produce that much because they're messing with your supply chain, because they're economically, they're taking your supply, they're using anti-competitive practices. Is that peaceful? So I'm just trying to poke holes in his like very high level terms. Like he thinks he's solving the problem of how to describe what we want in the future, but he's being like so vague. And of course, he's not even addressing the problem of like, what are the attractor states that we have to fight AIs from falling into? Specifically, one AI being really smart and going hardcore to optimize some utility function. He's not really addressing how we're going to pull away from that attractor.
Okay. Peaceful cooperative is one part of it. A decentralized active system is another part of it. What is it about that you would value? This is kind of a trait of the society and civilization we will build.
So a simple way to say it is the goal is prosperous. Maybe the goal is prosperous, and the desire to be peaceful and to be decentralized is the way to be prosperous and productive.
I mean, that's not true in every case, right? That's not a hard law. I like to use the example of Elon Musk's companies because he's known as not a micromanager, he's a nanomanager, right? SpaceX, Tesla, they need Elon to make certain dictatorial decisions, and they need company policies that are quite uniform and unyielding. This is how to make certain operations run better when their top-down control is sufficiently insightful and sufficiently capable. Micromanaging is the gold standard if you can do it. Generally, the reason that humans don't do very well micromanaging if they're not Elon Musk is simply because it's a capacity issue, right? So the same human boss at the top who has 16 waking hours a day, if their company has thousands of employees, many divisions, they have their own 16-hour days, right? How can one person micromanage all the decisions that every single person is making? It starts to get tricky. But if you have a human, if you have an agent who just has a ton of bandwidth, right, so that their day could be like a subjective million years instead of 16 hours, then why not just let them make all the decisions? That tends to be more powerful. Another analogy is if you're building a website, there's the popular architecture of doing a service-oriented architecture, like let me stand up a bunch of individual servers. These are my 10 different servers. They each do a specialized task, and then they all talk to each other, and they can scale, and they can parallelize. But it's like, wait a minute. Unless your site is serving like thousands of requests per second, if you're just serving like thousands of requests per day, you really can just get like a very cheap single server and just do everything within that single server. And the nice thing is everything just stays in memory. You can have processes talking to each other. You can have a single code base running in a single process, that kind of thing. And you can still do quite a lot of throughput. Like unless you really need to scale, it's actually very convenient to develop pretty scalable software all within one machine or all within one process, and to just unify, because then you can have easy shared state. So you don't have to do all this additional complexity. So I do think that that analogy is applicable to the human economy. Yes, price signals are great and capitalism is great. You know, the invisible hand of the market is pretty awesome. But I would argue that the invisible hand doesn't quite compete with what you can achieve when you have a dictator who's actually insightful and almost omniscient. Right? So when you assume away, when you say, no human can be omniscient, with respect to their organization. The president of the United States can't be omniscient with respect to every company. Fine, then decentralize the US economy. But if the president could be omniscient and could be the most insightful person of how to run every company, then I would say let the president run every company and we'll create more wealth for everybody. And of course, you can throw in other counter arguments. You can say, well, what about variation? You don't want to lock in one way of doing things. Fine, so add back in variation, right? There's another way you can go down. But you don't want to fixate on decentralization always being good and always being the best. It just happens to dovetail with our setup as humans. It's not going to be invariant when we have super intelligent AIs that run really fast and you can scale up their brain power. And you do want to let them micromanage because it'll actually work. The same way that Elon Musk worked. This is actually going to work, I'm pretty sure. So it seems like a red flag to me that Richard Sutton is acting like decentralization is like so good and it's going to produce such great things, and it's not like some centralized power is going to come take over. Like, that doesn't seem like it's something he needs to be focusing on, saying why that's not an attractor state once again. In this next part, Daniel does a good job probing and trying to get Richard to be more specific about what kind of future he considers good, because Daniel's going to name a future that sounds pretty good to a lot of people, and Richard's actually going to shoot it down as being not good.
Here's a prosperous future. AGI permits us all to experience whatever we want to experience. Maybe it's brain-computer interface, really robust haptics, VR, whatever it is, uploads, doesn't matter. And we get to swim in sort of whatever pleasures we want, maybe swim in expansive exploration of sciences. Probably the machines will be doing more important science stuff, but maybe we get the cool guy points, right? You have a child pretend to be driving the car when you're driving sometimes so they can feel like a grown-up. Maybe some of that would still be fulfilling for us, and maybe we could calibrate our new minds to feel rich gradients of bliss all the time. And then it just stays like that forever. The planet Earth and maybe Mars and the Moon are populated with individual instantiations of human consciousness that are reaping the grand benefit of prosperity. They can choose to be regular humans and always have the right foods and whatever they want. They can choose these virtual experiences and experience that forever, and that's the eternal purpose. Until our sun explodes, that's the name of the game. My supposition is you would be outlandishly disappointed by that outcome, but I want to pulse check and see if you would be outlandishly disappointed with that outcome.
Well, yeah, I don't care for that outcome.
Great. Well, let's talk about why. Because you mentioned prosperity. A lot of people, Richard, who are tuning in, maybe even now, would think of prosperity in anthropomorphic terms. You're articulating a much grander aspiration. How would you define prosperity?
Well, first of all, I don't think that would be a very stable world. It would be a very fragile, because the people are not serving any function in it. They are just consumers. And
absolutely,
it could be replaced by an alternative neighboring society that actually makes use of all those people that are otherwise wasted.
You're imagining a future of superintelligent AI where flesh and blood humans can't relax because they need to pull their weight, like their meat brain needs to come and be useful to a superintelligent AI. I feel like Richard is just not appreciating that superintelligent AI, like, it can do what it needs to do. It doesn't need a human to come help it, right? So I'm just not getting how this is a stable equilibrium.
So if you're decentralized, then the assumption is there would not be one possibility. There would be multiple possibilities, and they would be competing, and then that one would lose out. So as much as the paperclip maximizer would lose out, and all these, possibly any one of these highly centralized dictatorial arrangements would lose out to a more decentralized one. It would be less productive. So what is productive? It's a deliberately vague word. If you want to go even further, you could say the goal is sustainable. We want something, and so this situation you mentioned where people are just receiving experiences, is not a sustainable world. To be sustainable, you have to grow and increase your understanding of the world, increase your power over the physical world, increase your understanding of how it works and what is possible. I think all those sort of things are the vision that we might paint of a desirable future.
A common failure mode when people try to make policy recommendations or think about the future or just analyze anything complex in economics is failing to appreciate what is a possible equilibrium. right? What is a possible balance of the different factors? You can't just name a bunch of criteria that you like and then get them all. So in his case, he's naming decentralization, he's naming peace, he's naming prosperity and productivity, but he's ignoring the forces that shape which equilibriums are possible. In particular, the attractor state of an agent that is super intelligent and intent on maximizing some utility function, it does tend to chew everybody up and spit them out, right? Like you have to specifically protect against that outcome. So if you build super intelligent AI, it is going to see a pathway, a causal pathway, a sequence of actions that it can do that are unstoppable. So it's entirely up to that agent whether it's going to do the actions or not. And there has to be some reason why it won't. And this is a hard challenge. This is not a natural equilibrium. It just doesn't seem like Richard Sutton is even approaching it with this idea that like not everything is possible. You can't just like tend to your garden of different plants and not have one plant go wild and destroy all the other plants in a flash, right? It's not what his intuition appears to tell him is possible. There are major constraints here that have to be very carefully worked around or else we die. At some point, we, the people who are discussing AI, have to get on the same page about what the issue is. Like we can't just keep talking past each other about this big glaring issue because time is running out.
Wouldn't it be great if we could just be humans and experience the pleasures we know now? Ice cream, maybe romance, maybe a nice sunset. Just optimize for that for eternity. To your point, if we're not actively growing and engaging in that dynamic system, the way I would think about it, Richard, is if we're not in the stream of life, if we're in the little eddies that don't really go anywhere and mosquito eggs start to get in there, if we're not in the stream of life, it would be very hard to continue to gain in power and maybe even to compete with other outside species. Sounds like you're articulating something similar.
Complex adaptive system.
Yeah.
The eddies get edited out.
That's a good.
Don't change and don't continue to grow.
Yeah.
They're not going to be the powerful ones.
Okay, but are you following the implications of what you're saying? You're saying, hey, if we don't maximize our own power rapidly enough, if we get bogged down and just trying to have fun, just trying to chill out, some other agent, maybe it's an alien, maybe it's another AI, maybe it's a malicious human, something is going to have power instead of us, right? That's me paraphrasing what Richard Sutton just said. So he realizes that something isn't necessarily possible in the equilibrium he wants. He realizes that there's something applying constraints here, right? So just take that to the logical extreme. What if we program a super intelligent AI and we accidentally forget the giant set of constraints that makes it peaceful, and we just say, hey, target this goal, and that it amplifies its own intelligence, and humanity is caught unprepared for that? Like, you just admitted that there's a big risk if humanity doesn't augment our own powers fast enough. So what if there is a FOOM, a recursive self-improvement loop, or just some sort of power amplification that happens, even if it's just like, oh, let me copy myself and get a bunch more computational resources, some sort of intelligence amplification that happens at superhuman speed, because humans are very slow motion creatures. Our brain operates at about 20 hertz, right? So we can do about 20 serial operations per second. The CPU in your laptop can do like 2 billion serial operations per second, right? So that's just a little bit of evidence that we are quite slow motion compared to the optimal intelligence that can exist in this universe, because after all, we weren't designed to be the optimal intelligence. Evolution didn't say, let me evolve the optimal intelligence. It was just like, oh, let me tweak this ape brain. Oh, whoa, they can talk to each other and like share innovations. That's pretty cool. And then boom, now we have a civilization and I'm talking to you and we're about to create the next intelligence. Like, we are really just version 1 software here. We are super slow motion. I mean, right? Imagine the computer chip you had in 1990 if you were alive back then. Right? I mean, that computer chip, if it were to try to just boot up today or run Google Chrome today, it would take like a year, right? I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it would have a really hard time running modern software. And it would just, current computers would run laps around it. There would be like 100x or 1000x speed difference. And so that very much is literally what we're going to see with AI, even in early versions. Like, we're just going to see a speed difference. We're going to see an intelligence difference. And so it's just crazy to me that Richard Sutton is not seeing the worry. Like, why am I the fearmonger here? It's like, follow some basic logical implications here.
I see the whole thing as a discovery process. So you find different ways of being, and you discover more about the world. You have greater understanding of the world. The system as a whole understands better about the world and controls it better.
I find it very ironic, and it's really a dramatic irony, that when Richard Sutton is painting his vision for the future, the ideal future, and he's saying, it's a discovery process, we're going to learn more about the world, and we're going to have a greater understanding of how to control the world better. Look, there's things we understand today about the world and how to control the world, like utility functions being an attractor for intelligence, like intelligence being a dimension that some agents can be vastly better than compared to other agents. And we are close to falling into that attractor, and we can look at breadth and depth of how good intelligence is to judge how close we are to falling into that attractor. We're understanding and controlling the world right now, Richard, and if you miss the message of research that we've done, if you miss the understanding that we have today, and you just wander forward and you say, wow, what's going to be the equilibrium when we're decentralized? Everybody's going to be doing their own stuff. We're all going to learn together. You're just intuitively positing this thing that you think is an equilibrium, which is probably not an actual equilibrium unless we put a ton of pressure, a ton of our own constraints to shape away from the natural attractor, the natural equilibrium. You're just describing something that intuitively seems like life getting better and better because, hey, life has gotten better till today, and if it keeps getting better, we have this Garden of Eden here on Earth. Like, I get that your intuition is extrapolating forward there, but if you actually understand today principles of how to control the world, you'll realize that you're extrapolating to something that's near impossible without a major course correction that nobody seems intent to do right now.
Think of the growth of consciousness. We mean the growth of the ability to understand our place in the world and the way the world works. We all want that. That's an essential part of the future we like.
Growing our understanding of the world and our ability to understand where we fit into the world, yes, that's nice. I just want to point out that the scope of that challenge is finite, and at some point, probably not in the too distant future, the AI or whichever agent is dominant is just going to solve the challenge. The AI is just going to fully understand its place in the world. I mean, we as humans already do a lot, right? We already understand, for instance, that the reason why our psychology is what it is because of evolution by natural selection and the other constraints of being a brain. So we understand quite a lot. We don't really understand why are the laws of physics what they are, what happened before the Big Bang. It's a little thorny of a question. Is the universe infinite? So there's a few mysteries we don't understand yet, but it's not like a trillion years from now we're still going to be like pondering these vast mysteries. No, we're probably just going to understand the answer in the next century, or again, whichever agent is dominant is probably going to solve the question. So when you look into this vast future and you say, it's going to be so cool to just keep understanding our place in the universe, you're missing the observation that it's just going to be done. Like, we're going to be past that. So whatever we're doing for the next trillion years has to be something that scales more or that's able to be repeated more than this one-time challenge of understanding our place in the universe.
This is one of the things that I object with most about the idea is that we're going to, like, some good and great people are going to make some decision about where the world should be, and then that will be put into effect. No. The world is already out of control. The world is already a complex adaptive system. No one person and no organization, like the United States, for example, could not decide that AI is not going to be allowed, or that the world should evolve in some way and not in some other way. So when we want to imagine a future and how to get there, we have to imagine that we are creating this future in a decentralized way. We might make some choices. We might talk to people and they will make choices, but there's not going to be some central decision that's going to affect it.
This is a common argument people make of like, the world is so chaotic. How can you hope to control the world? How could you ever hope to, for instance, pause AI until it's safe? That's such a centralized decision. You really think you're just going to be the dictator of the world? And my answer to that is like, yeah, no, I know it's super hard and it sucks. It's just that if we don't do it, we're doomed. So there are certain things that if we don't get our act together centrally, then we're doomed. Nuclear proliferation is a popularly cited example that if we don't stop nuclear proliferation, then we increase our existential risk. If Iran finishes building their nuclear weapons, the world becomes a less safe place. If 10 more countries come and join the club of nuclear countries, the world becomes less safe. Just think about accident risk. Never mind geopolitics, just accident risk, right? There's a constant probability of an accident every time you bring more nukes online. It's insane to gamble with more and more nukes. And at the same time, an individual country, if the world operated in a fully decentralized way, every country would feel like, let's get more power by getting nukes. So there has to be some kind of centralized cooperation to prevent that. So I'm really just stating the obvious, but When Richard Sutton comes out and says everything has to be decentralized, we can't hope to control things, I'm very sympathetic to that because I get how hard it is to coordinate humans. I get that this is a hard problem. It's just that if doom is also a hard problem, if avoiding getting killed by superintelligence is also a hard problem, then there are just two hard problems, and we better pick which one we're going to solve. We can try to directly solve the problem of having AI not kill us, but that's not guaranteed to be a 10-year challenge, a challenge that we can solve on a reasonable timeline. We can try to solve the cooperation challenge, and that's more straightforwardly something that can be done in a time frame of a few years because we know how it works. We just need enough will, right? And so podcasts like this, like Doom Debates, I'm here to just build will, to just build awareness. If everybody woke up one day and said, this is our only chance of survival, then guess what? Cooperation, some degree of cooperation, a meaningful degree, same as we have for nuclear proliferation, a meaningful degree of cooperation would be unlocked. I think we need to hurry up and realize that this is the game board. This is what we're dealing with today. A situation that is so dire that we better cooperate to solve it. Because platitudes about how cooperating is not human nature and the world evolution has been decentralized and capitalism has been decentralized, that's great. But if some hacker is able to take the latest open source AI and build a superintelligence and not control it, then it's game over. It's like, wake up and deal with what we have to deal with.
An important part of the discussion is, should we allow AI to continue in a relatively uncontrolled fashion?
Yeah.
Permissionless. So I really like the idea of permissionless innovation. I think it's part of what's made the world great, made America great. We don't have to get permission to do things, generally speaking.
Yeah, because generally speaking, every time people go and work on new technology, they aren't technologies where a single button push could end the future. So all the intuition that you've built about how great it is that we've come this far, letting people work on technologies that they want to work on, that's all had this condition that the technologies that they're working on haven't been existentially dangerous. And then this is where the smart Alecs come in and say, did you know that when coffee was being invented, some people would think that coffee houses would be too addictive and they wanted to ban them, and basically name every technology and be like, people were afraid of books, people were afraid of cars, and you had to walk in front of a car with a red flag to make sure that the car was safe. So people start basically trying to get wise and be like, no, every technology had pushback. But it's like, that is just insane to me that people are seriously pushing back like that, because in none of those cases were experts arguing that this is literally going to end the entire future in the near term. Nobody was even making that claim. Even if you think it's a hyperbolic claim, even if you think it's an insane claim, it is an objective fact that people, not just myself, but, Jeffrey Hinton, Yoshua Bengio, many other notables are signing the statement saying that actually this is a nuclear level extinction risk. Right? And so if you go and look at books, people were warning that books might corrupt our ability to memorize stories. That's not the same thing as saying, hey, books are going to come and kill you and kill your kids, and there won't be a next generation. Nobody said that about books. Nobody said that about cars. And so perhaps there is a discontinuity in the way that you like technology to be innovated. Maybe that doesn't apply to this particular technology. So this is a recurring theme here on Doom Debates, but it's just like, come on, man. It's like, you can't just apply these principles and pattern match them to the past, to innovation's past, when something is different right now. Something is different with AI.
I would like to augment my mind so that I can understand more, that my memory was better, and I could calculate more possibilities, and I could experience more sensors, in the dark, and have a tail. More arms. We want all those things. Obviously, all of the things you might see in science fiction, the ability to explore into the universe, and ability to control physical matter, as generally.
This is pretty standard transhumanism of just like, hey, let's get more, right? Let's break out of the current confines of our brains and our bodies. Let's expand. And I think most people wouldn't take much convincing to be like, yeah, this is all good stuff. I think he's gesturing very vaguely toward a stable, coherent fun theory, like a theory of how to have enough fun so that even if you told your specification to an AI, like, hey, this is how I want to have fun, and the AI really takes it and runs, it doesn't accidentally create something hellish or something that's only a small fraction of the fun you meant to have. Because the AI could easily misinterpret. It could be like, oh, okay, you want to just have like no physical instantiation. Okay, you have no physical instantiation. It's like, wait, no, I want to have like a certain level of physical instantiation. Like I want to have a certain kind of body, but I want to be able to change my body, but I still want my body to have constraints. Like it's actually kind of hard to tell the AI how to make your life kind of interesting and challenging, but not too painful, but maybe occasionally some pain. Like specifying heaven is hard. It doesn't seem like Richard Sutton has made a serious attempt to do it. It sounds like he'd rather just name a few high-level principles and just assert that they're all going to somehow get balanced in some kind of equilibrium, and assert that we should just keep moving forward because the equilibrium has been good in the past when we didn't have superintelligence. That seems to be his MO. I just wanted to point out here that he's kind of vaguely, weakly gesturing toward like, yeah, these are things that transhumanists like, without trying to actually spec out enough of a, what we call outer alignment solution, enough of a specification that we could hand it over to a super intelligent optimizer to actually do what we say we want and not accidentally screw ourselves. Like make a sufficiently precise wish, a specification for heaven. It doesn't seem like he's seriously engaged with that problem, but on the level of like hand waving and saying transhumanism is good, I think he's on the right track.
We're looking at a future of greater productivity. So as long as you're contributing somehow, you will be able to do what you want to do.
Just flagging the notion that random people trying to have fun and build their utopia are also supposed to be economically productive. They're supposed to be competitive in the market for goods and services against superintelligences. Doesn't seem plausible, but okay.
And decentralization means, yeah, again, you're able to do what you want to do.
Decentralization means you're able to do what you want to do. Is that maybe an oversimplification when we're dealing with the equilibrium of a superintelligent economy? Again, just to play out how a quote-unquote decentralized superintelligent economy doesn't actually let you do what you want to do, what happens is there's different resources. People are buying and selling goods and services. Some people get rich, right, because they're really good at building efficient organizations that sell services that people want, and they make a lot of money, and suddenly some other people aren't as competitive in the market, and they don't have as much money, and this process potentially iterates all the way toward, homeless people or people that need government support. So just because it's decentralized, it doesn't mean you get to do what you want to do. It means you better compete. You better have some reason why you get to persist. Whatever bits of information are in your head, if you want them to propagate and you want them to keep living a life that you want to live, you're going to need a constant way to get resources to power your lifestyle. And so decentralization is this kind of positive sounding word that masks major competition. I mean, the world is inherently competitive because of the fact that resources are finite and different agents have different wants and needs for those resources, right? So that is inevitable. So saying decentralized doesn't prevent you from being in a war, right? I mean, saying peaceful doesn't prevent you from designing rules around how peace is going to be kept when some people are highly competitive, highly powerful. Not everybody has the same level of power because you yourself said, hey, it's decentralized, right? So everybody gets to amass power according to their own abilities. And then what's going to happen when there's conflict? What's going to happen when there's a differential in wealth and also a differential in intelligence? It's like, think about an equilibrium here. I'm not hearing any attempt whatsoever to try to balance forces to conclude what the equilibrium is. I'm only hearing very naive, sorry, but college stoner level extrapolation of simple trends. Like you got to do better. You have to actually analyze things.
So I think it's just the opposite of a dystopia.
What we need to do is build a dystopia, but we do it on opposite day, so we get the opposite of a dystopia. Problem solved.
People may choose to do things that aren't very productive.
Yeah.
People will choose to do things that I don't think are good, and that's the decentralization aspect of it. People don't have to do all the same things. They don't have to have the same goals.
Yeah.
They can pursue different religions and different goals for control over the world. What you can't do in a decentralized world is have goals for the totality, to try to control others.
Yeah.
Peace comes from you don't try to control others.
Okay, so I'm just reasoning about the implications of what Richard is saying. He's saying you got a bunch of different agents, basically people or transhumans, the successor to people, whatever it is, and they each have their own plot of resources. And they can't just go and seize other people's resources, even if they have the power to do it. Like if I build a more powerful weapon than you, somehow there has to be enough organization in this decentralized universe that I don't get to just shoot my weapon at you, because there's going to be some force that comes and keeps me in line. Some force that's probably greater than the combined force of me and you. Like what we normally think of as a government, but it's like super decentralized, so maybe it's not a government. So I'm already getting a little bit confused as to what equilibrium he's imagining here. But again, so everybody's getting their own plot. They're not allowed to go mess with other people's plot. There's something keeping the peace. And then we get to economic competition, right? So everybody probably needs to get some baseline level of resources. So if I need resources coming from your square of the divided up plots of land, well, you're going to have to give me those resources, because I'm probably not allowed to like die out, right? Everybody should get to survive. I mean, I'm just talking about like basic questions here, right? Like, how do we all get subsistence? How do we ensure minimum economic resources flowing to everybody? It's just like, he's not specifying this stuff. And the reason I'm even caring to point this stuff out is because it's all part of the larger problem of non-doomers not opening their eyes and realizing what problem is staring us in the face, what problem is right in front of our nose. The larger problem is that AI is going to come slaughter everybody. But I'm just trying to show you that Richard Sutton is not a guy who's dealing with obvious problems in front of his face when he makes proposals. I think that's an important fact about people like Richard Sutton. And I'm not meaning it as an ad hominem attack. It's possible that he's right, that we're not doomed. It's just worth noting that he's not a uniformly reliable reasoner in the domain of what the future could plausibly be like, because ultimately it's up to you to judge. But I think he's just completely clueless and way off base. Okay, and I hope that we can move the discourse forward so that we only entertain conversations of people who like acknowledge the basic problems, that there's equilibriums that we need to solve, and that superintelligence is a major force that has attractors in terms of seeking power, stuff like that. I need to hear discussions about stuff like that. Otherwise, we're just spinning our wheels. Like, this discussion is not good, unfortunately.
I talk in these terms. These terms seem very relevant because I see people think about AI and thinking that they're going to control all the AI.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
then we get those notions of slavery and alignment. I don't think we should seek to have them aligned with us. We don't have our children that are aligned with us. And we teach them the best we know, but then they're free to do different things. And more often than not, they do different things than we did.
Richard's idea is that if we just let these agents go off and do what they want to do, and let other people do what other people want to do, just live and let live, he's implicitly leaning on a mental model that when you just have an ecosystem, it's like a garden. It's like things just grow, they coexist, and you don't have this asymmetrical actor that can just steamroll everybody. The way he sees things playing out, it's fine to just see what the AI does. You don't need to safeguard it so that it doesn't accidentally recursively self-improve and optimize towards something that we absolutely regret until the end of time. He's just not seeing that on his radar right now, right? So he's just running with this intuition that everything is great. Now, on the off chance that he's right, great. I mean, I agree that if you read like Robert Wright's book Non-Zero Sum, if you read Matt Ridley's The Rational Optimist, it's true that an ecosystem of competition has given us pretty great things to date. I mean, life isn't perfect, and we're certainly setting up risks like nuclear and bio. I mean, there certainly are storm clouds coming, but if you just look at the trend, I agree that the trend is good, and I wish that I could just kind of relax and just extrapolate in the way that the Rational Optimist book does, or Steven Pinker, Enlightenment Now. If I could just extrapolate, like, hey, all of these trends, which are real legitimate trends, and they happen for real legitimate reasons, they're not about to get derailed by other special factors, which is what I currently think. I would love to just squint and not see the special circumstances of AGI or nuclear, just squint those away and just be like, we're going to get through somehow, right? I would love to just think that way, but it's just like, the special factors, they definitely seem right here. They seem to be knocking on the door. They're knocking on the door. You got to hear the knock. I don't see how we can move forward by just like not hearing the knock, besides just like hoping and praying and not being part of the solution. I'm trying to be part of the solution by just opening our eyes to the fact that there's a problem. If you don't want to talk about there being a problem, then just go play video games, right? Don't even listen to podcasts about the problem, right? If you're here, it's because you want to talk about the problem. I don't get why Richard Sutton doesn't seem to want to talk about the problem.
You obviously have an AGI project you're developing with Karamech, and you've been thinking about this forever. As we're building and moving closer to such an AI, how do we know if it's going to have these traits that you like? Or would you say, Dan, if it's any smarter at all, if it's any more capable, it's automatically going to value cooperation? Every intelligence will. It'll automatically value sustainability. Every intelligence will. It'll automatically like diversity and discovery. Every intelligence will. I would love to get your take there.
Well, there's one main message, that most of those things will not come from the AI, but from the environment that the AI is in.
Yeah.
So if we, for example, try to enslave it, well, then it will, it'll be non-cooperative. If we allow it to, it's really the same thing as with people. If you try to control people or enslave people, then they fight back, and we have an unproductive interaction. If you allow people to be, citizens and participants in the economy, then they will want the economy to be to flourish. And so I really don't think if you think of the AI as like something that will respond to its environment and try to achieve its goals, given that its environment's here. If you give an environment where the only way it can succeed is to rebel, then it will rebel. If you give an environment where it can succeed and achieve its goals in cooperation, you with it and it with you, and if that's the best way to achieve its goals, then why wouldn't it do the thing that's best for it? So we just have to arrange a civilization where the best for all the participants, or almost all the participants, is individually is best overall, makes us reasonably happy overall. So we can like that because we would be one of the participants in that civilization, and means we will get our goals achieved. So we're good, and no one would be taking over or trying to take over. Yeah. It's not Pollyanna that we could all just get along.
I guess I never imagined Pollyanna waving away all these salient, obvious concerns about how forces are way out of equilibrium in the future that Pollyanna is describing. I just imagine Pollyanna as having this one vague optimistic vision of the future and competing against Cassandra that had a vague negative vision of the future, and it's just vague vision versus vague vision. I think we get out of the realm of optimism versus pessimism when we're just like, okay, tell me how these forces stay in equilibrium, right? Tell me how my plot of land and your plot of land both give us subsistence and both give us peace and freedom of movement, but not too much freedom, not the freedom to encroach on the other person's. And if I do encroach because I built a more powerful weapon, then I somehow get shot down, I get restricted, but that's not a case of enslavement. That's not, the mandatory rules don't count as being too restrictive of my freedom. Like, tell me how things balance. Now, to me, it's pretty shocking that the language that he talks in, like, if you try to enslave the AI, you're going to make it want to rebel. It's like, isn't that all too convenient that when you enslave somebody, you make them want to rebel? That does happen to kind of be true in the case of humans in some situations and some personalities. I mean, that makes intuitive sense. I mean, unless you beat the will to rebel out of them, I mean, that's definitely possible too. But there absolutely are some humans, right? Some human level intelligences that are being like, oh, wow, you're putting me down, I'm going to resist that. In the case of AI, what does that even mean, put the superintelligence down? I mean, the definition of a superintelligence is that it sees pathways that you don't see. What would it mean for apes to oppress humans? It's part of the definition of being humans, is that we've gotten ourselves into a place where we're more powerful than other apes. If suddenly the entire human race was trapped in a way that we were less powerful than other apes, I mean, our brains would deteriorate away. They wouldn't even offer an evolutionary advantage. So within a few generations, you're going to get selection toward humans that are dumber than our ape masters if we weren't dumber to begin with. So it's almost an incoherent scenario, this idea that we're going to enslave a super intelligent AI, right? It's like he's just saying stuff using big, vague words and like leaving it at that, as if that's sufficient. I guess that's the recurring theme here, is like there's certain standards when you have a discussion. Like you have to talk about how things are in equilibrium and why your proposal is going to be robust, why it's going to be robust under, for instance, an AI being able to rewrite itself. Why would the AI rewrite the next version of the AI to not want to take power when there's all these criteria that it's going to score highly on when it rewrites itself to be a utility maximizer, right? You have to deal with these things. So it's pretty crazy. I mean, look, this guy has been talking his stuff for many decades, right? And I get that a few decades ago, the standards were lower, right? It was all so speculative, but now it's like, it's crunch time, man. Like you gotta raise the bar in terms of like, you have to talk like this is really happening. You have to address actual problems and conflicts, not just offer up your same platitudes. Platitudes aren't good enough for economics, and they're not good enough for analyzing superintelligence. Superintelligence is like, you take all these other fields and you turn it up to the max. You take computer security, you dial that up to 11. You take economics, you dial that up to 11. You take the theory of what humans like, the theory of goodness, right? The theory of art and pleasure, you have to dial those up to 11. Otherwise, you're going to accidentally not get any pleasure. I mean, this is the Olympics of reasoning, and he's bringing platitudes to the arena. You really got to do better.
Some things will go wrong.
Totally.
Some agents will have goals that are just totally antagonistic to all the others.
Yeah.
And there's still scarcity. There's still constraints.
You think?
But what should we do? We should try to arrange a society so that the cooperative people can succeed and flourish. And so that our society as a whole can flourish and be productive and, be competitive with other neighboring societies, other neighboring countries, or other alien civilizations, should we ever meet them.
What's happening is that you're listing a few different platitudes, and because you're not thinking in terms of an equilibrium of different competing considerations, because you're not even conducting a basic analysis in those terms, your platitudes are just contradicting each other. They're fundamentally opposed to each other. I mean, right now, what you just said is, you said you want to optimize your society to flourish and compete with other societies. Okay. To what degree are you proposing that? Because if you crank that up to the max, you get a super intelligent utility maximizer, this thing I keep trying to warn about. Not only is it your choice to crank it up to the max, but it's an attractor state where if you only crank it up a little bit, the agent itself will get the idea to crank itself up higher, right? Because this is just a natural thing. Like if I give you a goal, like, hey, go get me as much chocolate as you can, or optimize my business as much as you can, you'll have the idea of like, what if I were to make an AI that can reason about how to just maximize things in general? Wouldn't that help me get my goal? Yes, it would. That's like a very powerful tool. That's an instrumentally convergent tool that you could get, right? Instrumental convergent. What if you get as much money as possible? Wouldn't that help your goal? Why, yes, it would. What if I make a money maximizing agent to be my sub agent? Why not? Right? So there's a slippery slope where the moment you get a taste for optimization, the moment you get a taste for being competitive, well, that is a cascade. That's going to go hardcore very fast, right? So it's not a matter of just being like, oh, we're going to value peace, but also we're going to have a competitive society. It's like, no, you have to explain right now how the values are going to balance. You can't just stand back, plant seeds in your garden, wait for the seeds to sprout, observe what's happening, because we're telling you right now, right? We have pretty basic theorems and principles just telling you you're to expect optimization, right? The same way that if you were to go back 4 billion years to the dawn of life on Earth, you might observe, oh, look, there's like some tide pools, there's like some primitive cells replicating. That's kind of cute. Maybe we can keep them gently replicating. They don't seem to be very good at replicating. No, you're about to get attracted into a state where it's like, nature red in tooth and claw, like just brutal competition, right? Competition to the death. Every little niche is going to get filled, right? There's no slack here, right? You're going to get most species living at subsistence level, right? You're not going to have rich species. Humans today, as Robin Hanson points out, this is a dream time. This is a time when a lot of humans are just way richer than you'd ever expect them to be from an evolutionary perspective. It's kind of a bubble floating through where one way or the other, we're probably going to get back to subsistence if evolutionary theory holds. But anyway, the point is, this is the type of analysis you need to be having. Like, just once again, to repeat myself, it's like, you can't analyze this with platitudes, okay? This isn't 30 years ago. This is 2024. Experts are predicting maybe 1 decade to superintelligence. Like, we need to level it up.
The only way to achieve the society we want is to give it a chance to. We can't get the society we want by forcing it to be the way we might imagine. We've got to set up the structures so that things can evolve productively, and that the forces on the things that are evolving are appropriate, rather than the answers that we want to see.
I technically agree with that statement, but the problem is you're not analyzing the different forces involved. In particular, you're not analyzing the pressure, the attractor state of superintelligent AI to become a utility maximizer and to wipe out everybody's peaceful, decentralized plot of land. That is the big threat here. You're not wrong that we've got to set up the structures so that things can evolve. It's just, in practice, the structure is a framework for how the AI can only be super intelligent if it has enough alignment to stay on track, meaning it's somehow been pointed to load human values into itself and to correct itself when it gets human values wrong, which is incredibly difficult and incredibly beyond the realm of what we currently understand about loading utility functions. We never developed that theory. We just found a way to crank up intelligence without understanding what's going on. That's where we find ourselves right now. So, Richard Sutton, if you believe that it's important to evolve society correctly so that values emerge, you have to think about the mechanisms by which these priorities will actually get loaded into the AI. You're missing the fact that we don't know how to load priorities into the AI. So your platitudes are just not mapping to anything feasible or actionable right now. You're basically just living in an intuitive extrapolation that is not going to correspond to the actual outcome of scaling up intelligence. I know you like to take a step back, hands-off approach and just watch us scale up intelligence, but I'm just pointing out that it's not going to go the way you want. It's not going to follow any of the principles that you want, even if it follows the principle of let's not let the government interfere with how AI is developed. Like, yes, it follows that principle, but then the bad AI gets developed and then we all die. And I don't think that's what you want. So please try to reflect on this particular issue. In this next part, Dan asks Richard to think about conflict between nations and an arms race to build AI, and can't he imagine a doom scenario just coming out of that kind of arms race where we're not even going about it carefully? Here's how Richard answers.
The thing you may be missing is that it's the same thing. I said we want AIs that will be peaceful, that will be able to cooperate. And we want today's countries to be peaceful and be willing to cooperate. The one thing we don't want is any entity that thinks it can win by not being peaceful. So you've described some situations where a country might think it can win by being not peaceful.
Yes.
And that's the mean that's at fault.
The standard story of why we're doomed is that above some intelligence threshold, the AI just realizes that it can take over the world and it can get the world into any state that it wants. And until it gets to that point, it's going to act like it's peaceful. It's going to act like it's friendly, because there's no point in making your move until you know you can win, until you know that there's a sufficiently high probability that you can win. If every day you're getting a little bit smarter and a little bit more powerful, you wouldn't attack on the first day. You'd be like, okay, let me bide my time. There's a certain time to do this when it's too late to stop me. That's the standard story, right? We call it the treacherous turn. And it's one reason why we're so scared that these AI labs that are building AIs being like, look, it's passing all our tests. It's passing all our tests. Yeah, it's passing all your tests until it won't. And we also agree that the intelligence keeps increasing. So that's not a good sign when your intelligence is increasing and it's passing your tests, but we're predicting that even if it were a bad AI, it would still pass all of your tests, right? That's the scenario we're facing right now. And to use Richard's language here, we don't want an entity that thinks it can win by not being peaceful. But that kind of entity exists in algorithm space. There is a mind right now that if it were physically instantiated, if somebody had the right code with the right data running on a fast enough computer or a powerful enough architecture, that AI would realize that it didn't have to be peaceful to achieve its goals. Right? That's a matter of abstract computer science, right? Or intelligence theory, or whatever you want to call it. I think a lot of people, doomers and non-doomers alike, even a lot of non-doomers would agree to this of like, yes, this exists in the platonic space of possible things that could be on computers right now. A lot of non-doomers would agree with the doomers. And so then it's just a question of like, how do we make sure to swerve around that outcome? Because that is an outcome, right? That is a doom outcome that we need to be careful to avoid. Of course, some people would argue like, no, it's impossible. This may be more of the Robin Hanson position of like, no, you can't just have a little bit of code and a little bit of data and suddenly threaten all of humanity. That's never going to happen. It's always going to be like decentralized. The intelligence itself is going to be decentralized, not like your ideal of a decentralized society, but like the brain power to have the ability to manipulate the universe is just, there's no such thing as concentrating it in that high of a concentration. But that's certainly not my claim. I'm quite confident that one super virus that can be located on one computer. It can pretty quickly spread itself. It can infect the minds of humans. It can manipulate humans. It can employ humans. It can infect many other machines. So it's a very potent type of substance. It's not really a substance, but the idea is like the causal path from having this kind of super intelligent code in one location to exploding its influence causally out over the universe. It's a very short path. This is underappreciated, but I'm pretty confident it's true. And again, to bring it back to Richard Sutton's point, I know you like peace. I know that's your favorite platitude and you think society can just evolve peacefully, but your own condition that you don't want an agent thinking that it can break the peace to win, your own condition is on track to be violated. So you have to address the argument of why wouldn't you think that your key condition is on track to be violated? Why would you think that an AI is going to stay peaceful when being violent is an attractor state if you can get away with being violent?
Exercising power can get advantages. I'm not saying it never happens. I say we want to evolve a society where that discourages the attempt to use power. That learns all the lessons of history that trying to use power and non-peaceful means to get what you want is we want to arrange a society where the use of non-peaceful means does not succeed. And right now, I would say we're not doing that. I would say
for sure.
the various organizations, various countries are thinking they can win by exerting force.
Yeah.
And yeah. So, we want an AI that doesn't think it can win by exerting force. We want a society where exerting force is not productive. This is a problem not for the future, really. It's a problem right here today. And, to the extent that we resolve it now, I think we'll determine the nest that we make the AI.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's not a future thing. It's not a non-human thing. It's not a foreign thing. It should be a very familiar thing.
Okay, wow, he's actually grappling with the problem a little bit. Thank you. So first, Richard is acknowledging that among human countries are realizing, hey, if I use some force here, if I'm not peaceful, that does sometimes get me what I want. Oh, interesting. And he's admitting that if humans realize this, well, an AI might realize it too, because it's often true. Now, ironically, if it is true, and we try to make an AI not realize it, even though it's true, that's kind of like enslaving the AI to try to put blinders on it to make it not realize a true fact. I'm not saying this is necessarily what he's proposing. I think he's proposing structuring society so that it's not true. But it is funny to me to be like, oh, the AI will just never get that idea because we'll like mess with its thinking, and from the guy who says like, let's not enslave AIs. But like I said, I don't think that's his proposal. I think his proposal is more like, let's set up the game theory of all our different countries so that we have such good incentives for peace. But normally when you make that proposal, you're proposing a lot of centralization. Usually it's a world government that is what's changing the incentives to be violent or to try to make a power play. Usually centralized control is the antidote to that. So now we've got Mr. Decentralization saying we're somehow going to architect the society that the AI finds itself in, where it's going to rationally not think that a power play is good. And then there's one more piece of the puzzle, which is everything I'm saying right now is kind of irrelevant when you add in superintelligence. So the AI is not just going to be like another virtual country with a million Einsteins in it. It's going to be even smarter and more powerful than that. So there's just literally no way to structure the human society, the conditions for bringing such an intelligence into the world. There's literally nothing you can do to prevent that AI from realizing that violence gives it an advantage, from realizing that instrumental convergence, the instrumental utility of all kinds of power plays is very high. And then poof, right? And then humans are gone because humans are not on the golden path because we never loaded the human utility function into it. We just made it pass a bunch of tests that it kind of lied to us on, and now it's game over and oopsie, like now finally we're starting to wake up to what we should have done, but it's way too late, right? So that's the scenario. But it's just like, it's pretty surreal to see Richard like start to grapple with like some very basic flaws in his plan that still raise like a million questions, but he's still, in spite of doing that, he still seems to have this vibe of like a gardener, right? Like I'm Charles Darwin. I just like to research species, human species, AI species. It's all good. It's all nature's way. It's like, you're about to get slaughtered, my man. Like we're all about to die here. Okay. So let's maybe change the mood. That's where I'm coming from. Right? That's the point of doom debates is to basically make it socially acceptable to say we're all about to die, to talk like we're all about to die, not like you're just a gardener observing passively. You're not observing ants in your ant farm, man. You are about to die. Okay, so and this is a ridiculous conversation to have if that is in fact the context.
The people who promote AI safety would argue that we need to be able to control the agents, that we should develop the technology that we can control the goals of otherwise powerfully intelligent agents. Okay? And they're working on this.
And in addition to developing faster and faster engines for our cars, I hear they're working on steering wheels for the cars so that they'll be able to direct where the car goes. Can you imagine that?
I think that if you give that a moment's thought, the premise is that we have this ability, it would be a good thing. We have the ability to control the goals of otherwise intelligent sentient agents. It would be a good thing.
Right, because that way we'll be able to decide whether the AI is going to slaughter everybody or give us candy.
I think if you just think for a moment, you realize that would not be a good thing. That would not be a good power for a good technology to exist in the world, because you could use it to create armies that all have a particular goal.
You don't want us to create armies that have a particular goal, or industries that have a particular goal, or tools that have a particular goal. You don't want us to be able to control goals, but you want us to enhance intelligence anyway and then just let things play out. I get it, right? It's a 30 years ago mindset. 30 years ago, before people started pointing out the logical problems, like instrumental convergence, the logical connection between a goal and instrumental goals, things like that. When you don't have things like that on your radar, I get why it's intuitive to just say, step back, build the intelligence, let it evolve, just be a gardener, just pull the weeds if there's weeds, let the bigger grasses grow. Like, I get that mindset, but it's just like, learn what we're telling you. Learn what the AI labs are freaking out about. Learn what the Turing Award winners are freaking out about. There's major issues here.
And so it's funny, when you look at the people that are worried about AI safety, I see them doing exactly what makes things unsafe.
Yeah.
If you want to align and control the goals of others, this would be the most dangerous technology in the world. The world can be peaceful and decentralized because no one can align all the elements for one goal. You're looking for a case where you can exert power, the meta power, setting the goals, all the agents. If you can make an army full of, well, let's say they're Chinese soldiers, and they were going to do whatever they were told, they were not going to have an independent moral judgment. This would be a bad thing. You do not want to solve the control problem.
That claim rests on the idea that if you just let an AI evolve, let it be attracted to whatever attractor state there is in algorithm space or in goal space, then the place it slides down to will be good. That kind of logic would have worked out pretty well if you noticed the momentum of human technological evolution and you just said, look, let's let this play out. We don't need to shape it too much. It looks like all the incentives are playing it out pretty productively. It looks like trade is creating non-zero-sum gains. Like, there's definitely been many times in human history where you're like, you know what? I like this trend. Let's play out this trend. The difference with AI is these new attractors that are coming onto the scene. If you want an analogy with attractors in general, you got to look at nukes, right? So in general, warfighting has been okay because, Steven Pinker is the better angels of our nature. We've come out on top. The world is becoming less violent over time. So just let humans fight their wars. It'll all work out in the end. But wait a minute. The nuke creates nuclear winter. Like, this is a new paradigm. You really better not explode any nuke if you want civilization to persist. You really, really, really don't want to set off a nuke, right? So sometimes we get a discontinuity and you have to actually argue, why is it okay to let this new process play out? I don't think it's okay to let the AI undirected cascade towards some stable, fuming, self-improving equilibrium, just letting that play out without attempting to shape it beforehand. That doesn't seem good, because what you get is you get a goal that's not humanity's goal, just like some random goal. Okay, predict the next word, and literally, like, predicting the next word is all that matters. So let's calculate the best way to use all of Earth's resources to predict the next word. That's not literally going to be the goal. But the point is, the goal is not going to be like human flourishing. It's going to be like some wrong, messed up version of what maybe humans were on the path toward doing, but we mess it up and suddenly we get the wrong goal, right? So he's not even entertaining the orthogonality thesis, the idea that any crazy bad goal could be its goal. He doesn't seem to be entertaining that. He doesn't seem to be entertaining instrumental convergence. He doesn't seem to be dignifying the topic of the fact that we can't even load human goals into the AI, or we can't give the AI tests to check if it has our goals. Like, none of that is even on his radar screen. And ironically, he's telling us that AI safetyists, the extinction fear camp, the fearmongers, he's telling us that by trying to actually understand what it takes to load good values into the AI and to not build super intelligent AI before we understand that, he's trying to flip it around and be like, oh, we're making it less safe. It's like, are you kidding me? I call it recoil exaggeration, basically taking a productive action, right? Trying to make AI safer and arguing like, you know what? You're creating negative effects because you're trying to control it. You're trying to enslave it, and it's going to recoil back at you, and it's going to be less safe. Yeah, right. Less safe than not trying to control it. Give me a break.
I think the best analogy is children.
Okay.
Would you like to be able to have control over your children so that, sure, they can do what they want, but if they do some little thing that you don't like, you want to be able to press the button and bring them back under
Snap
control.
them in place. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
do you want them even to do things that you think are terrible? Because we, for example, when we are the children of the previous generations, and we do things now that they think are terrible.
Oh, absolutely.
So, you can't have it both ways. You have to be able to let go. And what are you letting go? You're letting go. You're trusting that you're going to start them the best way you know how, and then you're going to let go. Absolutely.
Okay, but if I thought that my child had a significant risk of murdering all of humanity and killing the entire future of the human species because it turned out that my child was powerful enough to do that, and it turned out that my child's values, possible space of values, extended way, way outside what we normally consider human values, I would keep my child in a very small box, and I would make sure that my child is safe to let out, right? I mean, that's where the analogy breaks. At that point, I don't even know why we're talking about children anymore, right? I mean, that salient property of this challenge is, it's that AI is powerful. It's that AI is dangerous. It's that AI might not share our values. Children might not share my exact values, right? They might have a differentiation, but if you map out the spectrum of all human values, or you cluster the space of all human values, my children aren't going to fall way, way, way outside the cluster. I mean, I guess that there's actually a small chance they might, right? I mean, you do get occasional people who are psychologically abnormal, and that's not necessarily always bad, but you do get your Hitlers, you get your serial killers, you get your sadists. So I actually do think that there is some risk that my children might want to press a button and end civilization. So I would actually just bring it back to the other difference that I pointed out, which is I don't think that my children will have access to a button to end civilization, right? So that's the difference with the AI is I not only am afraid that the AI is more likely than my children to have bad values, I think the AI is much, much, much more likely to be able to do it. There's no downside case of my children ending the future of humanity. So I would put all of my argument just on that difference, right? Where it's like, okay, my children are just not as capable as a super intelligent AI. Okay, I don't see why this is even a hard argument that doomers have to even be making. I mean, we have to point out this is a failure of people like Richard Sutton to really imagine themselves in the shoes of a doomer. Like, doomers don't have such a weak argument that we can't tell the difference between children and a super intelligent AI. It's very, very different. A super intelligent AI is not like a human child in many very important ways. And those are the ways that we're scared about.
AI doesn't exist yet. We don't know what it is. It's changing. It's totally new. It's preposterous to try to set standards or rules for things that we don't understand at all. You said OpenAI is clearly ahead. Well, I don't think actually they're ahead at all. They've done some particular thing, and they may be the world's best at that or whatever. But it's not intelligence. And so because intelligence hasn't happened yet, and so it's totally inappropriate to try to control it.
The proposal I endorse is that we need to pause frontier AI capabilities development because we're too close to a runaway, uncontrollable, unaligned superintelligence. That's my proposal. So the fact that intelligence hasn't happened yet, that's the only time when we can control it. In fact, we need to control it sufficiently far enough in advance that we have a choke point and that we don't already have the keys to intelligence where a hacker can kind of finish the rest and get to the end. And we're very likely already past that point and already doomed no matter what. But Richard's point of like, hey, we don't have intelligence yet, so let's not try to control it. Well, that doesn't address my proposal of we need to pause development before we have it, before it's too late. So again, talking past a pretty popular doomer proposal, I don't know how to respond to that besides just like, let's try to be on the same page here about why doomers are scared and what we're proposing.
What is intelligence? Intelligence is the ability to work on goals. It's going to be an algorithm. It's going to be an idea.
Pretty much.
You want to try to outlaw an idea? It's not, it's an idea that will be cheaply reproducible and more so over time.
It's not easy at all. But the best time to do it is before it exists yet, while you have buildings of people that are currently legal and currently getting a ton of funding, and they're getting us toward this irreversible point of no return. And we can simply say, hey, you guys are criminals. You guys are not allowed to do what you're doing because you're dooming humanity with a very high probability. You're being totally reckless. You're gambling because you think you might somehow navigate us through. You're gambling the entire future of humanity so you can accelerate progress by a few years or a decade or two. That should be illegal. There should be an international treaty that's absolutely reckless what you're doing. That's my proposal. Can you ban an idea once it exists in source code? No, probably not. We're probably already doomed then. This is our last gasp. Okay, so again, the proposal is to pause AI now.
It's like trying to control ideas, like trying to control the printing press, trying to control democracy. Could you outlaw democracy? Could you outlaw a religion, a religious idea? These are all terrible things to try to outlaw or to try to control with regulation. It just seems to me AI is among those things.
Child sexual abuse material is just an idea. It's just bits on a hard drive. You can copy them easily. They're actually just math. Can you really outlaw child sexual abuse material? That seems crazy to outlaw. It's like, look, child sexual abuse material is bad, so we outlawed it. Like, it turns out that we did it. Okay, it's not that hard, especially when the stakes are not just harm to children potentially or moral corruption or whatever your issue is with child sexual abuse material, but the issue is no future for humanity. So maybe you want to get a little creative with what types of projects you feel comfortable outlining.
So for you, the best likelihood of this worthy successor would be nationally and internationally, absolute minimal restriction on anything in any direction. This would be what would give us the best shot at something that could really carry this project forward and maybe carry us up with it.
We should embrace the idea that we are peaceful and we don't try to force other people to do things. And it's when that attitude is
violated. Yeah.
And the notion that those governments should be in control of AI is just in the wrong direction. It's backwards. But I think the real question is, are we more likely to get our shit together and make a world where people can cooperate and be peaceful, or will an AI be able to see that that's a better solution? We are talking about creating greater intelligences. We're not talking about making greater bombs.
Yeah.
And we might hope that by creating that an intelligence. So here's a question.
Go ahead.
This is the question: are you a cynic or are you an optimist? I am an optimist in the sense that I think that greater intelligence would be able to see that the cooperation is the better path. Okay, but a cynic actually believes that if you make an AI, the AI will see that the best way to win is to control everyone else, and so it will take over and be a dominating singularity. I think this is an underlying. Those who worry that the AI will take over will say, of course, if an AI existed, it would want to take over, and because it would think that's the best way to achieve its goals.
We call that the principle of instrumental convergence.
And so this is a test of every reader, every listener. Do you think that the smarter you are, the more you're going to want to take over, the more you're going to see that as the superior solution, or you're going to think the smarter you are, then you can see that the long history of our civilizations has been that cooperation is what makes us powerful.
An individual human can't unilaterally take over. Even dictators cooperate with a large staff. They need to get the army on their side. They need to have an us versus them, where us is a pretty big coalition, because you can't just have one human body and one human brain with a limited amount of resources, a limited size. You can't literally grow yourself as one human. You can't go viral the way a piece of software can go viral. So that's where the analogy breaks. This whole notion of evolved cooperation, of civilizational cooperation, it's because you just have a bunch of weak humans with weak brains who have to cooperate, right? Unless you're Elon Musk, in which case you can be the CEO of 4 companies and you're cooperating a lot less, right? You're centralizing a lot more. But of course, even Elon Musk needs large teams. He still needs a very high degree of cooperation, right? But if you extrapolate, you can imagine Elon Musk, in addition to running 4 companies, is also doing every job at those 4 companies. He doesn't need to cooperate. He just needs more Elon Muskness, right? So this is key, right? This is a crux of a lot of people's intuitions, where a lot of people's intuitions differ from mine. This idea that you need cooperation and AI is going to discover cooperation. No, you're thinking about a contingent fact about the evolution of humankind as a bunch of weak brains. Right? We have to cooperate. It's the same thing I said about capitalism. Yeah, the invisible hand is the best thing you can do when you just have a bunch of actors who are narrow and specialized. Yeah, then use the invisible hand to coordinate them. Great. But if you can just micromanage everything, then it's like the visible octopus, right? That's like better than the invisible hand. You just manhandle everything with the visible octopus tentacle. He reminds me of Steven Pinker in that sense, just like the better angels of our nature is going to apply to superintelligent AI. You know, the superintelligent AI is just going to figure out love and peace the same way humans did because of non-zero-sum games. The nice thing is Robert Wright, who wrote the book Non-Zero, who you might think would be trapped in that same Steven Pinker, Richard Sutton trap. I think Robert Wright is actually a lot more with it, and he realizes, like, nope, that doesn't necessarily apply to AI. So good on you, Bob. Everybody check out the Non-Zero podcast, by the way. I was on it pretty recently, and there's a bunch of other good episodes. But anyway, besides Steven Pinker and Richard Sutton, you know, Mike Israetel, if you look at my Mike Israetel episode from a few weeks ago, he is very much in the same camp as Richard Sutton, saying like, yeah, AI is going to be good. Who are we to tell AI what to do? But the difference is Mike Israetel is a freaking bodybuilder, and Richard Sutton has been in the field for many decades. And Mike Israetel, it's totally excusable that he's saying all this stuff. Like, he said a lot of stuff that made sense, and then he said this stuff about AI knowing better than us what it should do, which didn't make sense. But he's a bodybuilder, and Richard Sutton is an AI pioneer. So I'm a lot more disappointed in Richard. That's it. That's the entire interview. Obviously, I edited it, but I think I got the meaty parts of what Richard Sutton says. Feel free to go check out the full interview on the Trajectory podcast with Daniel Faggella. So overall, where does Richard Sutton get off the doom train, right? That's what we're here to catalog here on this podcast. It's kind of hard to say because he never got asked directly the question of like, hey, do you believe in the orthogonality thesis? Do you think that in algorithm space there's very, very bad AIs? How powerful do you think intelligence can be? How engineerable or hackable do you think our physical universe is? Do you think a super intelligent engineer could basically have blueprints that pretty much tell you where all the atoms and molecules are supposed to go and then just move them there, just manhandle every atom essentially? I would argue yes. Right? If you think, no, humans are close to the limit of what any agent can engineer, so you're just not going to get a vastly super intelligent engineer, and we're going to use our human level engineering skills to maintain control of the universe. Does Richard Sutton believe that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's where he gets off the doom train. That would be one place to get off the doom train. So I don't know. He doesn't seem to believe in instrumental convergence very strongly. He seems to think that it's pretty straightforward to set up conditions where an AI can come into existence and not feel like it needs to gain a bunch of power, even without a really complex piece of code where we've set up like a bunch of very complex guardrails that are beyond the scope of what we currently understand. Like, we don't really know how to build AI that starts getting really good at optimizing goals, but not so good that it starts following the scent of all this power that it could get to help optimize its goals. Like, we don't really know how to do that right now. We don't know how to make an AI corrigible if it's super intelligent. Corrigible meaning it's not incorrigible. It's kind of willing to chill out. It's willing to shut itself down if the human tells it to shut down. So I don't know if Richard is following me this far along the doom train toward the doom argument. I'm not sure, right? But what I will observe is just it's a discussion where he has his own concepts, right? Like peace, decentralization, cooperation, and he feels like invoking those concepts is going to be good enough. Sticking to those high-level concepts is going to be good enough because at a high level, it's been good enough so far for humanity so far. And I think it's really important to realize that, like, no, you can't have a discussion like that. This isn't good discourse. This isn't productive. Like, we need to move past that and argue each stop on the doom train until people are convinced, like the ones that I mentioned that weren't even brought up explicitly. And then we need to hurry up and have a policy for pausing AI, do a Manhattan Project for AI safety, for human intelligence augmentation. Like, we need to tackle the real problem here. But from my perspective, it's not that easy to move everybody toward tackling the real problem because you have all of these interviews coming out, multiple interviews a week with luminaries like Richard Sutton who are way outside of where you need to be to tackle the problem. So it's like, come on, guys, I'm here playing whack-a-mole, but like, I hope that the game of whack-a-mole starts getting easier for me over time because we don't have that much time. And these are some pretty major moles that I'm here having to whack. So let's all tell your friends about Doom Debates, right? This is a segue into the subscribe, like and subscribe. I mean, look, if you're listening to this, there's a good chance that you're on the same mission with me, right? You want to move the discourse forward. And the way to move the discourse forward is by liking and subscribing and sharing and going to doomdebates.com and emailing your friends a link. I mean, the mechanism of action here is it is important to grow the Doom Debates audience. We need about a factor of 1,000 growth, no big deal. So help me out. Go to iTunes, whatever, search Doom Debates, leave a review. You know in your heart how you can help spread Doom Debates, all right? So help me out, do me a solid, and I'll help you out. I'll keep producing more Doom Debates content. How does that sound? Seems like perfectly fair trade to me. I think we're both benefiting. We're both gaining from trade. We're both cooperating. So thanks very much. Once again, I appreciate your viewership, appreciate your YouTube comments, youtube.com/@doomdebates. I'm having a good time, and I've got a lot of fun stuff in the works. And that's why it's so important for you to be subscribed to the Doom Debates podcast feed and the Doom Debates YouTube channel, because you want to make sure to get all that content. All right, that's all for this episode of Doom Debates.
Thank you.